Hello, everyone. We are back from Las Vegas GP. As you can see, we got the playmat. This is the participation gift for anyone who entered the event, which I think is awesome. I think playmats as a prize are really cool. Just in general, it makes you feel like you're kind of getting your money's worth a little bit more. Just because playmats tend to be more expensive than individual cards. I know there's different treatments and promos and stuff like that. But this one, I mean, it's got Diva Grand Prix. It's got its own like special artwork. Like this art really, as far as I know, isn't used anywhere else. So I really quickly, before we start getting into everything here, went to the Grand Prix, played Carnival. I finished in top 8. I don't know what the final standings were. Supposedly, I looked after the finals had finished, and they had me as like 6th. But I lost in the top 8 first round. I played against Kentaro, who ended up winning the whole thing. I went 5-2 in Swiss, which is pretty good. I lost in the Swiss also to Kentaro, so I played him 3 times, and he handily beat me all 3 times, which is not shocking because he is an extremely skilled player. I also lost in round 7 to Andrew from the Life Burst podcast. We had a really close match. It came down to one crucial life burst on his side to save him. So he ended up getting in top 8 as well, obviously at 6-1. And then thanks to the generosity of my tie breaks and the fact that I started the day 5-0, I think was a big factor in that. And then the last 2 rounds I lost to the guy who was undefeated and then to Andrew. And also one of the people I beat on the way to 5-2 also made top 8. So I just had really favorable tiebreakers, and I managed to actually get in the final slot at 5-2. So we will do a deck tech for Carnival shortly. I figured I also would just do a quick little prizing support just so you guys can see, because some of this stuff is really cool. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff, depending, I don't know, these are like top 64 prizes, the Trouble, Baphomet. This Parajulis art is incredible. As someone who loves green and especially loves Parajulis, Parajulis is one of my favorite Signy, and I will need to get a playset of these probably because this is incredible. I didn't even know this was a thing until I like way late, and I was like, man, I wish I would have opened this earlier so I could try to trade for it. Xiao Yun is another good one. I think this one has already existed, but that's another Signy that I'm very fond of as well. The Bruno, a lot of people love this Bruno as well, which understandable because this card is really powerful already, and it looks great. We've got our 3 servant pack here. So, you know, it's cool because I know Andrew was looking for, I think it was the wedding one, but nice little variety of artworks for your servants. And then obviously I'm the boring guy who like just gets the Elrig ones. So like I have the Ant servants for my end deck and so forth. And then we've got the 3. This Osag is an older one, and the Arkwin is for sure. I think this Exi is new. I don't remember if it is or not. But we got those as well. And then the top 8 prize is the Ultra Superheroes. This is the main reason I wanted to do like this part of the video. This card is actually textured. It's impossible to see on camera, but there is actually a texture to it, kind of on the borders and stuff. In Magic, this is called a foil etched. It's like foily, but there's some texture to where the foil is. I think there's some. It's not quite as pronounced as it is in like the Digimon card game. Some of the Digimon foils are very heavily textured. This one's a little bit more subtle, but the artwork obviously is incredible. And it works because this is the main piece I use in my deck, so it felt appropriate. And of course, the reason for the season, the whole reason I picked Carnival in the first place was to get this one. And we actually got there, as you can see. I think, as far as I'm aware, there were 3 Carnival players who went. We haven't gotten the data yet. This is like the day after the event. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but as the only Carnival in top 8, I was able to get there. We have a guest appearance from my cat Beans. And then Butters is over here in the background. But they have missed me, so they're very happy to see me. So you may have to bear with us on that. So we got there. Yeah, I was not expecting to get top 8, to be perfectly honest. I would have been happy with top 64 and the top Carnival. That was basically the goal, is be the top Carnival, get the Sleepy, and then anything else after that is bonus. And we managed to get all the way to top 8. we went 5-0 at the very beginning, as I mentioned before. We started off 5-0, and then we ran into Kentaro, which lost us, and then we lost against Andrew as well. But yeah, overall the day went extremely well. There were a lot of people who. Part of the reason why I think I did so well is just because people didn't know Carnival and people were reading cards. Even though like some of these cards are old, they're not cards that people play very often, and they had to read them and they didn't know exactly what they did. And there were a couple people as well who got kind of gotcha'd by Carnival's effects, who they just didn't have the experience playing against Carnival, and that really worked in my favor. So I think if this tournament happens maybe like a month or so later, I don't think I hit top 8 because people will, even if they're not playing her regularly, they will at least know what Carnival does and, you know, have a better grasp on that. But the fact that the card is so new and just a lot of people just haven't seen Carnival, and we kind of use that to our advantage. So let's go ahead and just do a quick little deck check here. Let me silence my phone briefly so that I don't get 1,000 more messages. So the Elrig deck, obviously Carnivals, like not much to be said about that, although I will need to get some LRs for these after this. I kind of waited to see, partially just because I didn't have the time, but judging by how well the deck went, I may have to bling it out a little bit more for the sake of representing the Carnival. So the Madoka, we are playing Madoka Assist with Float and Clap. That's a pretty standard assist line, very defensive. As far as I'm aware, so of the top 8, 7 people in the top 8 had Madokas. 2 of them were Madoka centers. The other 5 were Madoka assists. The only one who didn't was Hannah, who was playing Nova team. So obviously Madoka's not in that team. But of the people who were playing Madoka and assist, of the 5 of us, we were all playing Float and Clap, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's how that was. So, I mean, they're so powerful. You get the card advantage from Float. You get the defense from Clap. Basically everything you want to have for your assists. So she sets up your turn really well and then protects you when you need it. So if you're playing blue assist, like, it's really hard to argue against playing Madoka. She's just so powerful. So I am playing black as well. I'm running a Nanashi line with Nanashi scattering and Nanashi selection. Originally I was playing with Machina in this build. I opted to switch to Nanashi for a few reasons, one of which being that there's a lot of like tech combo cards that kind of work together in the deck, and having selection be able to, 3 different times pull Signy from the trash if I need them, made it really easy to have these sort of tech cards and sort of one-off cards that if I do need them, they become really easy for me to get my hands on. And also the Enter Charge 2 is something that should not be slept on. And again, that also goes into some of the tech cards, which when we get into the main deck, we'll see those as well. The scattering is just a sort of a generic vanish, which, in the deck that wants to go aggro, you want to run that. And then, like I said, the selection, having this flexibility with the flexibility that Carnival just gives you on the Elrig. I guess I didn't really talk about Carnival, what she does. But basically these two combined, even though this is sort of like a red aggro deck, it has a lot of flexibility that goes along with it. So if you're facing like Enter Burn, for example, which can really hamper your ability to open lanes if you don't have Enter, you can just Nanashi to Enter Charge. If you're facing Hand Destruction, Nanashi can get you stuff back pretty easily. It's more importantly, she can get you specific cards that you need, which is like the best way to do it. And then if you're like in aggro, if you need to get lanes open, she also can open lanes for you. So Nanashi selection is really useful in the deck. Let's talk about Carnival, because we haven't talked about what she does. And again, there are a lot of people who just hadn't really faced her and didn't know what she does. So she has a once per turn ability to discard a card. And then she gains an ability that when she attacks, you can choose one of 3 different things. You can either draw a card, Enter Charge 1, or you can put a target Signy on your opponent's field into the trash. So what this basically means is if you do nothing, if you have nothing to do, but you have a card in your hand that you're like, this card's not great, I'd like a better one, you can just discard it, and then when she attacks, draw one. So it's basically a free cycle that if you have maybe like a Life Burst dedicated card, or if you're in a situation where like your opponent, you've just refreshed your opponent and you have a Polaris and they have 25 cards in the deck, like you're not going to need the Polaris, just dunk it and find something else. The ability to Enter Charge is potentially useful as well. it means that you can basically cycle cards in your hand to become enter, which is something that's really, I think it's pretty unique for a red Signy to have. We've seen it in blue, and you'll see that's another card that's in the deck. But it also is a way to, again, keep your enter reserves high. And then the ability to trash a Signy is not quite as powerful, but there are potentially backbreaking scenarios you can do with it. I had a situation where an opponent hit an ambush life burst, for example, filled a lane with it while I was attacking, and then because it happens when Carnival attacks, this is like an attack trigger, like the lane's already filled, I attack with Carnival, and now I just trash the Signy that you played, even if it's like something that he was actually planning on using it on his turn. It was a Miko Memoria, and he has some combos and stuff that he does with it. So he played the Miko and was pretty happy about it, and I was like, okay, we'll just trash it. And that's definitely a scenario where if he knew what Carnival did, he probably would not have made that decision. But again, here we are. She also has a once per game ability, which is, in my opinion, the build around part of Carnival, which is to make up to 2 target Signy on your opponent's field, Servant 0 until end of turn. So if you're unfamiliar with that, I think I have the tokens still in here. Servant 0 is a vanilla 1k Signy with no abilities and no colors. So they get this. If you watched my box opening video, I was very excited to pull the foil Servant 0 because it's the funniest card that they could have possibly printed. So they just get this, and 2 of their Signy just become this. And as we get into some of the deck text, you'll see how easy and important it is to be able to vanish something like this. And what it essentially boils down to is that once per game, Carnival has a really easy board wipe situation where she can, in a lot of cases, spend 0 enter and literally just use the once per game, use a card, and maybe also use the Nanashi selection to vanish if you need to, or there's a couple other ways you can do it too, which we'll get into. And it just becomes so easy to open lanes. So it's sort of a pretty standard red aggro deck, but she has her once per turn ability gives her flexibility in the ability to, I just said the word ability a lot, to generate a lot of resources to turn cards into enter or to open up lanes that are potentially otherwise blocked that may be out of reach for Signy that are too big or have shadow or what have you. And again, Nanashi does help with that as well, but it's an aggro build, but it has a lot of value associated with it and also a lot of potential for some really interesting combos, which we will see in a moment. So I will stop foretelling and we'll get into some of the other cards. So the main piece, as I mentioned, is Ultra Superheroes. It is the red-black mode, which is not the mode that people typically see. People use this in Espertama and basically any Esper build because it, if you have a white Signy, you look at the top 5 and add 2 to your hand. So it's a selective, it's a better draw 2 because you're getting 2 cards of your top 5. And then the black portion is you mill 10. The red portion, which is potentially just as relevant, is vanish a Signy with power 12k or less. So again, with this, with Nanashi, with Carnival, being in red and black, there is so much removal in this deck that it really forces your opponent to kind of act, or they just potentially lose the race. And Carnival basically tries to put as much pressure on the opponent as she can, and to force them to either maybe suboptimally grow or not have the resources to be able to stop her. Just the constant pressure and even the card advantage that she can generate is almost too much. The other piece I use is Can't Stop Pretty. It's a pretty standard defensive piece option. I will say, of all the cards that I ran this weekend, this is the one that probably disappointed me the most. I think this is probably something that could really easily be switched into a better flex tech piece. I don't know if it would be a Xenocluster necessarily. My first instinct is something like, I'm blanking on the name. It was the playmat I was using, where you can exceed 4 to just remove a Signy from the game, whatever that Signy or whatever that piece is called. I'm still currently fried because it's Sunday afternoon. But yeah, there were 2 of the 9 games I played. There were 2 games where this actually mattered, and it did literally anything other than discarding 3 cards. So I think this is probably something that could be swapped. I mostly put it in, to be honest, as at least a little bit of tech for Dash Harana, and then I never faced Dash Harana, so I didn't have to worry about it. But it's the kind of thing that Carnival is so aggro, and typically the aggro deck wants to be determining the pace of the game. So if I switch this out for something that is a little more facilitated toward that, I think the deck could be improved. So that's definitely something on my list as a potential swap. So that is the Elric deck. I was pretty happy with it all overall, except for, again, the Can't Stop Pretty. But I used every mode on Carnival multiple times. I used every mode on Nanashi a bunch of times. I would say the most common one was probably the Vanish one, but the Intercharge one also was really helpful. And then the adding from trash, I basically did it. I only really needed to do it when there was like specific pieces that I need to get out of the trash. And what those pieces are, well, we'll start getting into them. So in the main deck, we run 4 Servants, as I'm sure you all assume. We run 3 Hecates. Hecate is a great early game card filtering card. She also does really interesting things combined with a few other cards in the deck, namely Hyacinth. This is another card I was not super thrilled with overall. This is probably another card I would switch. Hyacinth, for those of you unaware, which is probably everybody because nobody else plays this card, you can discard a card, and then at the end of turn you enter charge 1. So what you can do, this is something I was running in my green and builds for a while, is you play Hecate, you look at the top 3, you see what's there, and you say, okay, I don't want this card, but it's a good color, so I can leave it on top, and then I can just enter charge it with Hyacinth. And that's another thing you can do with Nanashi Selection. You can play Hecate, you can see, okay, these cards aren't useful, but I need the red enter, or I need the black enter, or whatever. You can leave them on top, use Nanashi, enter charge them, and now, again, you know what's coming. Or if it's a servant, for example, like there were several times where I enter charged away servants to Nanashi, but using Hecate, you can kind of mitigate that a little bit. So yeah, Hyacinth is, it's more enter fuel. I kind of overestimated my enter needs. There were a lot of games where I just had way too much enter and nothing to use it on. There's a few tech cards, again, we will see why I did that. But I think I over-prepared a little bit. I don't know. Having the ability on Nanashi seems more important than on Hyacinth, to be honest. So this is a card that I think is potentially one to swap out as well. I mostly liked it too because sort of with the Carnival theme where she can turn cards into other resources. Hyacinth is the same thing. You can turn a card in your hand into an enter, which is something that not a lot of decks have the flexibility to do. I run 2 Berenices. This is a pretty standard black level 1. The ability to mill 2 is potentially relevant at times. I don't think it ever came up in the Grand Prix. There was a time where it came up where I was in a unique position because I was about to refresh and the Berenices got vanished, and I could have chosen to refresh myself early. I ended up not doing that, and that choice was a huge factor in the game. So if I had milled myself, I would have lost that game, but I didn't mill myself, and it ended up winning me the game. But additionally, she is also very frequently a 7k level 1, and she has a life burst, which is potentially relevant as well, to add a target level 2 or less Signy without a guard from trash to hand, or put it on your field, which there are some fun things you can do with that, as we will see. I mean, you're in red, and so obviously Lancelot's something you could potentially do with that. I also run 2 Umar Memoria. This is a card that greatly exceeded my expectations. On enter, you can look at the top card of your deck and put it on the bottom, if you would like. So again, it's sort of like a mini of Hecate, but she has a life burst, so it's not quite the same. But yeah, it's basically, again, a little bit of a free Hecate. But she also has an action ability to put this Signy from your field to the bottom of its owner's deck, reveal the top card of the deck. If it's not Umar Memoria, you can choose to put it on your field. So there was a situation where I had Umar Memoria on the field. I looked at the top. It was Matahari, which, preview for this card. This card's wild. To pay 2 coins, which is something that Carnival generates, to vanish a Signy with power 3k or less. So this is just Romail, except instead of paying enter, you pay coins, which is huge because now you can use your enter for a bunch of other things. So it was my turn 1. My opponent was going first. I played Umar Memoria. I saw the Matahari on top. I was like, all right. So I, dunked the Umar, played the Matahari, and now we're firing. So it's, the ability to cycle and get that stuff. This card is great, to be honest. It's hard because the more Umers you run, the less powerful they are because you become, slightly more likely to hit Umers on the top. So I don't know if I'd run more than 2. Her life burst is also relevant as well. You look at the top 3 of your deck, reveal a Signy from among them, and add it to your hand and put it on the field. So it's another ambush life burst, which is another thing that potentially, has ramifications with how much like Signy removal is in the deck. The ability to hit one of these, flip a Lancelot, vanish something of your opponents and block a lane. If you can ambush out, I don't know if you guys play a lot of red, but ambushing out a Lancelot and getting a 2-for-1 off of a life burst like this is one of the greatest feelings that I think is in the game. So we talked about Matahari. This card is very powerful. I only run 2 just because I only generate 5 points. So running more than 2 makes it harder to actually use them for something, because if I have used, if I use the Matahari and maybe I use my coin somewhere else, which there's a few other coin spenders in the deck, then it's just a dead card. So I didn't want to overflow with it. Plus I do run a bunch of Lancelots, which are kind of, the 5k versus 3k is relevant. So I didn't feel like I needed more than 2 of these. But this card is also, if you're running coins and you're in red, so like Carnival or Rill, or even if you just have a center, if you're playing Mel and you also have red, like this is a card you should be looking at. For level 2s, I run 4 Tristans. This has become one of my favorite cards. It is a vanilla 10k, which if you've seen the life burst on Tristan, you know exactly what it does. It is look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add up to 3 of them into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom in any order. So if you hit this, then your hand is just full with whatever you need. And it's look at the top 5, you get your choices. You can pull Servants, you can pull whatever you need for the next turn. I was against an Aya player in one round who hit one of these on turn 2. My hand was empty at the point. He hit one of these on turn 2. I refilled my hand. I did a full turn 3 with everything that I needed. Emptied my hand again. He discarded. I think I had like 1 card in hand maybe on his turn 3. So he basically emptied me out again and then hit a second one of these to, again, just refill me up again. And at that point, with how much like Aya relies on the discarding and the fact that this card just shuts down any sort of discard plan, is really useful. So, sorry, we have a little bit of a beans incursion. You want to sit on my lap? He's not much of a lap kitty, so he's probably going to jump down. Or he'll jump on the desk. We'll just go ahead and forget that. Okay, we are running Lancelots. As you might expect, there are 3 of them. This is a card that I have run builds with 4 of them, and 4 always feels like too many. 3, at least in the ceremony and the GP, it felt like a good amount. I never felt like I was like in dire need of a Lancelot, and I never felt like I was in a situation where I had too many. I suppose it's not true. There was one game, the game I played against Andrew from my first podcast, where my board was literally just 3 Lancelots because I just had them all, and that was my entire hand. But I mean, people know Lancelot. That's a great card. There are 3 of these cards. This is Erebus. So this is the primary tech card of the deck. Erebus has an enter effect. All Signy on your opponent's field get minus 1,000 power until end of turn. And beans. If you remember, Servant 0 is a card that has 1,000 power. So the theory behind the deck is you basically Carnival once per game. You blank out 2 of your opponent's Signy into Servant 0s. You play one of these, and you vanish them both for free. And then the other one also is slightly weaker to do other things. I run 3 of them because the free board wipe is so critical to the deck, in my opinion, in terms of continuing to apply that pressure. It's also the 1K. It's not an irrelevant number. I was in a situation, and as we get into the level 3s, you'll see where the math gets kind of weird on this, where if I had one of these in hand, well, I should say if I had 2 of them, because I had one and I needed a second one, I actually could have done enough to vanish something else for free. Obviously, the main goal is to hit it with the once per game, but a free 1K on everything is not nothing, because it also means if your opponent has like a 13K, now you can swing Polaris into it and vanish it, which is a thing that can happen. So yeah, this card seems to, like, in my opinion, is just made for Carnival. I think there may be other builds that also can use it, but the fact that you can just blank out like 2 lanes for free, you are generating a lot of enter, which is kind of the downside to Carnival in general, and just red aggro, I suppose. But I Literally the whole reason I'm playing black is because of this card. Because when I looked at Carnival, I was like, I remembered back in my Sanbaka days, Fuyuki Hakase, which is on enter, give a Signy -1. I was like, I bet there's more black cards that do that. And then I found this card. This is a P02 card. So did anyone play this ever before P02? But it's arguably the most important card in the deck. And I run 3 of, well, yeah, arguably, because there's the next card that we're about to show. Allos Pyrrlook, which if you haven't seen this funky little interaction, this is another absolute banger in the deck. So she has an auto effect once per turn. During your main phase, when you discard a Signy, you put that card from your trash onto your field. So what that means with Carnival is you activate, where's the 3? There's the 3. You activate her ability to discard a card. So say, well, it's just, I mean, for the sake of example, like I have a Pyrrlook on the field, I activate Carnival, I discard Erebus, Erebus goes to the field. So now I've activated Carnival literally for free. Additionally, that's like not even all that happens, because Pyrrlook also has an ability. During your turn, when a Signy enters your field from a zone other than a player's hand, you freeze target Signy on your opponent's field and give it -2k. So now, in addition to literally activating this for free, you're freezing a Signy and giving it -2, so you can potentially vanish it, or if you don't have enough to vanish it, you can at least force your opponent to enter charge it or whatever, remove it from the field, so with a little bit of hand denial on that as well. So again, there's a lot of incidental ways that like you can subtract power from your opponent's stuff and kind of get them into the thresholds for like the Lancelots, for example, and Pyrrlook is a way to do that. So this card with Carnival is a hilarious combo, and it does some really gross things. She also has a once per turn action ability to pay 2 coins and your opponent discards a card. I never use this because with Matahari, and there is another coin spender later on, it's just not impactful enough. I can definitely see in more dedicated discard builds using that as an option, but when you're running aggro like this, and the whole point of Pyrrlook is to basically make Carnival free, in addition to also getting some incidental power reduction on it, it just wasn't as important for me. So yeah, the coin ability is mostly wasted on it, but the reason to run her is just to activate Carnival for free. We are running 3 Diebrides. This is a card that I have like a love-hate relationship with this card because I almost never actually had it on the field. I think there was one time I played it and actually did use the enter effect to discard a card and look at the top 2 and choose one and so forth. But her auto, which is when a red Signy on your field becomes the target of your opponent's ability or effect, they choose a card from the enter zone and trash it. Not super relevant in most of my matches, just because part of the downside of Carnival is how much she enter floods your opponent, just from vanishing so much stuff and just doing general red and black things, that the enter burn is incidental. Really, the fact that she's here is she's a level 3. She's a good red level 3 that has a life burst. That is typically okay. Her life burst is choose 1 vanish target up Signy or draw a card. Unfortunately, there's the upped clause. So I did hit a number of these that were just draw a card, which was like, man, I wish this was better. But so this is another card that may be swapping out, but I would definitely keep this red just because you need some good red level 3s. I do have a few in here, but specifically ones that have life bursts as well. So we run 2 Polaris. In addition to the Ultra Superheroes, this is another way to put non-open lane damage on your opponent if you can't find a lane opener or something like that. Or again, just being able to cause a refresh and not trigger a life burst and not give them enter on it is really powerful. And it's another really scary way to do that. And we're not using Harmony for anything else. Polaris is a 12k. She's really scary, and she really kind of forces people to act. And with the Ultra Superheroes, it's a nice little combo. So we also run 2 Mirage. I don't think I really need to go into Mirage. It's just a great value card. It's a Rise Signy, but you can pay 1 enter to give a Signy -8k. So again, with some of the crazy interactions, is you can Pyrrlook, you can discard whatever, put it on the field, give something -2. You play Mirage on top of it. Now they're at -10 total. If you have, the Erebuses again, to give them an extra 1 or 2. There's a lot of like interesting little math lines you can do in the deck, and Mirage in conjunction with Pyrrhic and Erebus, and the next card that we will see. There's a lot of ways that you can Signy that seem out of reach, maybe at 13 or even 15k, with some of these cards in conjunction are like suddenly in play to be removed. So I run 2 Guzuko, which is not a card that people talk about very often. So Guzuko is a once per turn effect. When your opponent takes damage, you can pay 3 black and 2 colorless if you do crush one of your opponent's life cloth. I actually used this effect because, again, I'm generating so much enter between Carnival and Hyacinth. And this was kind of like the secondary goal of the deck, is that if I just have a bunch of enter, I can just throw it all away to Guzuko and get a free crush. And it actually did happen, and it mattered. It was a game where if I hadn't done it, I probably would have lost that game, but because of the freebie life cloth crush and all of the enter that I just had. So if I decide to remove the Hyacinths, which I may, this is a card that maybe end up becoming something else. A lot of people were talking to me about Nanashi Memoria, which is not a card that I actually had looked at, so that may be an option to get a little Nanashi package in here instead of the Guzukos and the Hyacinths and stuff like that. So just potential options in the future. She also has a once per turn ability to pay 3 coins and put a target Signy from your trash on your field. So kind of similar to how Nanashi works, Nanashi selection specifically, where keeping, hello beans, the trash is another way to sort of keep your Signy potentially in play. She has a once per turn ability that I skipped over, which is during your turn when a Signy enters your field from your trash, target Signy on your opponent's field gets minus 3k until end of turn. Which, if you remember, there's another card, Pyrrhic, that plays Signy from the trash. So now, you play Pyrrhic, you discard Guzuko to Carnival, Guzuko comes back, Pyrrhic sees her come back, minus 2, Guzuko sees herself come back, minus 3, so now you got minus 5, play Mirage, that's minus 13 total. If they are a 15, now you can hit them with Lancelot or Matahari or whatever. So that's mainly the reason why I put Guzuko in here, because of that, again, hilarious interaction between Pyrrhic and Carnival and Guzuko, sort of like a little trio of how they all work together. And you know, the five enter to crush a life cloth is mostly incidental, but just more ways for the aggro deck to aggro, because you basically want to threaten as many lanes as possible every turn. If you're not threatening every lane, there should be a very specific reason why you're not. Hopefully it's not because you are unable to, because of maybe like a what's that traffic sign that just came out? Because traffic sign kind of walls. Or, you know, like I actually did not see any Zhao Yuns, but that's another one that it's a little awkward if you're, you know, before level 3. Yeah, you definitely want to be putting as much pressure on your opponent every turn as you can. Similar to the Guzuko tech, I have a Halbert in here, which Halbert is once per turn. When an upped Signy on your field becomes the target of an ability or effect, your opponent's assist, Elrig, or life burst, you can pay 3 red and 1 to crush one of your opponent's life cloth. So this is sort of like an insurance policy if you're in a situation where you know, you may have lethal on board, but you know your opponent still has an assist left. If you have the extra enter, you can just have an Halbert on field, and then if they try to stop you, you still get a life cloth crush out of it anyway, and potentially threaten damage that way. That ability, the reason she's in there is specifically for that ability. It did not matter at the ceremony. It almost did. I was in a situation where I had 3 enter specifically, so I didn't have enough to pay, unfortunately. But if I did, you know, she would have been relevant. So this is one I'm not sold on. It's only a one-of. She's red, so I can always just ditch her to enter. And again, because of Guzuko and Nanashi, the ability to just rip cards out of the trash, like this is just a one-of tech card. That may become something else. I don't know. She also has an ability to pay a red, discard a card, and draw 2, which is a nice little combo there as well. That you can sort of the inverse of Hyacinth, where you're discarding cards to gain enter. Now you're paying an enter to draw 2. Or I guess it's +1, but still. And then the last card I have is a Nobunaga. So Nobunaga is Rise on top of a red Signy. And then, of course, she's an enter, pay a red to vanish a Signy with power 8k or less. So similar to Anna Mirage, but not quite as flexible. And then she has an action ability to pay 2 red and give herself double crush. So again, this is another one that's just like, if I have her in hand, if I need the pressure, or again, if she's in the graveyard, if she's in a zone I can reach with Nanashi or Guzuko, I can bring her out and put a whole bunch of pressure out of nowhere on the opponent and see, what they can do about it. So that is the deck. Obviously I'm very happy with how well it performed. There are still some upgrades and stuff that I think can be made to it. I will say that these 3 cards and the original build of the deck, these 3 cards were going to be Rills, and I opened 0 Rills in any of my boxes, and then I looked at Guzuko a little more closely, and I was like, you know what, I think I can make this work. So Rill is another option for a red Signy that I think fits in the deck, the Rill Memoria. I may try to get my hands on a few of them now that the ceremony is over and I have some time to do that. I think Guzuko still fits in the deck really well just because of how well she works specifically with Pure Look and, again, Carnival. I think I could probably, dump a Halbert for Rills, or maybe some of the Dive Rides. I forget if Rill has a Life Burst or not, but those are some options. And again, people were talking, several different people. It wasn't like just one person, it was like a bunch of different people were telling me about Nanashi. That may be something I include as well. I don't remember what she does off the top of my head, but that may be some upgrades to do it in the deck as well. A lot of the deck I think is solid enough that I wouldn't make too many changes to it. But yeah, like the Halbert is one for sure. Diabrides potentially. What else is in here? I do like the Umers. Part of me wants to run more because of how much I like them, but it's hard to not double up on them. Yeah, the Hyacinths or something I'm potentially removing. Hecate is a nice value piece. You could potentially swap it out for something for sure, but I personally like it in terms of just because of the consistency and stuff that she provides with the deck, especially with how many like weird tech combo cards there are. Because if you like play Hecate and you see that there's like 2 Erebus on top, you never need more than 1 Erebus. So especially if you already have one in hand and then you see 2, it's like, oh god, get these out of here. Or Hecate also helps you take for servants and that sort of thing. And with how much like incidental enter charge the deck is doing with Nanashi, you can more easily regulate what gets thrown in the enter. So I don't think I would remove Hecate, but yeah, some of these, I would say these specifically are targets for things I would swap out. But yeah, overall, yeah, I went 5-2. I was never, other than when I faced Kentaro, who was just an incredible Wixoss player. I never felt like the games were out of reach. The one non-Kentaro game I lost was to a bad Life Burst, which happens. I mean, there are things that happen. Not to say that that was the only reason, because I had some games that I won absolutely because of my good Life Bursts, and my opponent just didn't have any. So there's certainly an element of luck that goes along with it. But the Vegas gods were kind to me, and my choice to play the most gambling-themed... I guess that's not true. I think Guzuko also has a gambling theme to her, but... yeah, it felt appropriate to be in Vegas, rolling the dice on the Carnival, and ended up doing extremely well. So, yeah, very pleased with how it went. It was great to meet a lot of you as well. I probably should have opened with that, but it was cool actually being able to match some faces with names and stuff like that. And, everybody there was so chill, and it was great to meet everybody and talk and just hang out for, the day and a half or so, and even get some games in the lobby until they kicked us out because we were having too much fun, which apparently is not allowed in Vegas, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, so we'll just cut it off there. If you guys have any questions about the deck, or you want to talk about the GP or whatever, I'm always open. So hit me up, and thanks for watching. We'll see you around.